Mobility has always been more than movement. It has fueled freedom, forged connections, powered commerce, and driven progress throughout history. Moving Minds is a series about the people behind the systems, the visionaries, experts, and builders shaping the future of how we move. These are voices that often remain within specialist circles, yet their decisions quietly shape the systems we all depend on. Our mission is simple: to bring their stories, insights, and experiences to the wider mobility industry, giving stage to the thinking and decisions that will define the future of mobility.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Moving Minds. It's a pleasure to have today a special guest. His name is Tim Geiger. And Tim spent many years at Ford Motor Companies, where his career unfolded alongside one of the most transformative periods in modern mobility. So, from the early days of connected vehicle to the emergence of software-defined cyber physical systems, Tim was deeply involved in navigating how a global automotive organization adapts to rapid technological change. And throughout his journey, Tim worked at the intersection of engineering, digital platforms, safety, and cybersecurity, gaining firsthand experience in how complex systems evolve, how responsibility scales, and how decisions are shaped when technology begins to redefine what a vehicle actually is. His perspective is grounded not just in innovation, but in the human and organizational realities of leading through uncertainty and change. And what makes Tim's voice especially relevant for Moving Mind is his ability to reflect on that journey, how mobility thinking has shifted over time, what it takes to balance progress with responsibility, and how leaders grow as systems become more connected, more software driven, and more consequential. Thank you so much for taking the time and welcome to Moving Minds.
Yeah, thanks, Giuseppe. Glad to be on the call today.
Excellent. So let's jump into the questions that we have prepared. So let's talk a little bit about the origins. And I mentioned that you're a very seasoned leader in the automotive industry. So what was it that first drew you into the world of mobility or automotive in the first place? And how did you end up in the role that you had at Ford?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Maybe not so much drew me in, but more pulled me into the role that I ended up in at Ford. About 15 years ago, when Ford decided to do their connected vehicle or infotainment system, they pulled together a group of SMEs that were needed to properly integrate this into the vehicle ecosystem. So, with my background in architecture, engineering, and also software engineering, I was asked to join this team as one of the SMEs. So I agreed to do that, and the rest is kind of history. But it was looking back 15 years ago to where I am today. I'm so glad that I made the decision to join this team. That original implementation by Ford was our what was referred to as the Sync system, and Ford partnered with Microsoft to create the platform and drive that into implementation. Now, through the couple iterations of Sync, one of the things that we realized in this journey was Sync was made up of a lot of software that was being developed essentially real time to be implemented. So I introduced the concept of, hey, let's do something, because typically anything that goes into the vehicle has to be hardened way before the manufacturing time to be proven out and all of those great things. But because of the nature of how we design Sync, and this is where it gets into some of the first of the safety and the cybersecurity, in there. We designed sync that had two modules with a firewall in between. And when you think about that, that's important because one of the modules faced the inner workings of the vehicle. The other module faced the external world where you had that connectivity and the firewall in the middle. The concept was that you would never let something get through that firewall into the vehicle to impact the safety functionality of the vehicle, while you could still do more stuff facing the outward world. So one of the things I introduced and we perfected and launched, and this goes back, oh my God, over 10 years ago, was the use of um, provisioning the sync module at the end of assembly with with the freshest of the software releases that we had. I do recall sitting in some of the PD leadership meetings where they said that will never work. But the chief of PD said, I want to give it a try and test it and see if we can harden this. Long story short, we did that. And I would like to think that that was one of the very first implementations of OTA within the automotive industry. And as you know, we're heavily using that today across the industry.
Yeah, definitely. I can hear and also see the excitement when you talk about your journey. So, what is it about the work that you did and just shared with us that gives you a sense of purpose and lasting impact ultimately?
Well, I really think um, getting people to understand product cybersecurity and how you need to design that into the product. And I think what really satisfies me is the team that we built and how we implemented product cybersecurity at Ford. We never had any exposures that impacted any of the safety, any ransomware attacks, or any of these types of things that had any impact on Ford. And that took a lot of work and convincing, especially in the earlier days of the implementation. And it was always a challenge of figuring out how to do these things as we were moving with a rapid change of technologies and what was looking to be implemented.
Yeah, I can only imagine how that felt. I mean, today we talk about automotive cybersecurity as something that is given, but going back 10, 15 years, as you described, where it was seen more as a fad or something that, is not really scaling as big as we understand it's now. I appreciate all the challenges that you may have faced internally, but also externally to even educate that this is a serious thing, and eventually it will become also big enough that it is impacting not just single vehicles but fleets of vehicles. So I think that is very interesting to go along this journey with you. Can you share then a something about the job that maybe most people, even in the industry itself, would be surprised to learn?
In the industry, maybe not so much because it's becoming more apparent. Um, but convincing people in getting the understanding that the cyber team understands the full design aspect of a vehicle. When you think about it, you have the PD organization is made up of groups and subgroups that specialize on a module, an area, if it's powertrain, if it's braking, whatever the case may be. Within cybersecurity, over time, you quickly have to become well versed in all of those areas and have a strong understanding in all of those areas so that you can effectively apply cybersecurity in the correct ways and in the correct areas. We had a concept at Ford that we talked about layers of defense. So you better understand where those critical components are, how you have to protect them. If in fact somebody was able to get through one layer, were you effectively and quickly able to isolate and prevent them from getting to some of those critical safety? That's probably why you see in a lot of cases where the automotive, the safety organization, and the cybersecurity organization become almost best friends in how they're operating, because they leverage each other in doing a lot of this work. But I would really say what a lot of people were surprised, even internal at Ford, when we worked with groups, is how well we understood their area of expertise, and how we would work with them to design the cybersecurity into each of those areas.
Yeah, it's interesting to see over time how the necessity to address cybersecurity on the product side actually helped OEMs to break up silos, which maybe still exist today. But as you describe it, just the fact that as a cyber professional, you need to be generically enough to understand the overall automotive ecosystem, but deep enough to understand the nuances that matter for cybersecurity is really fascinating to me. So, what is your take on that?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. But driving those requirements, especially understanding how requirements are developed and implemented within automotive, is very challenging. Also, the cost aspect is always there. You know that you have to be conscious of what you're implementing and why you're implementing it. So the use of data becomes very effective. I can't tell you how many meetings I sat in where I heard from engineers, PD engineers, and upwards through some of the ranks of management. That would never happen to us. So not only understanding what could happen, it's using the data to help drive those decisions. And you need to come up with ways to have valid data that's going to show you that. But then to show why it's important to implement that and the options that you can take to implement of those things. I'm going to go back to that layers of defense. And one of the things that we introduced, improved out, which was very difficult to do, but I think it's had a lasting impact, especially with the automotive architectures where they're at today. We introduced CAN message authentication. Um, and when we first introduced that, once again, that was met with a lot of resistance. But after showing what could happen and why we were looking to implement and why this was important, especially with the architecture we had at Ford, um, we gained the go ahead to do this, and I think that's set us up very well to protect us for a long time. Now, granted, architectures are going to be changing, and I think that's one of the big struggles in the automotive industry today is coming up with this next generation architecture. But I think we're well prepared that when that happens, and we continue to work with the PD architecture teams on that next architecture to protect whatever they design to put in place.
Yeah, just to double click on something you just said for the audience that we have who is not very technical. When you say authentication on the canvas, can you elaborate just in lay words what it means and why it's important?
Yeah, so if somebody can hack into the vehicle, and they can get to your CAN bus, just imagine what they can do if they take over control of braking, of acceleration, you name it. You want to isolate and prevent that from happening up front. Well, putting an authentication would be very similar to anything you have with applications that you would use from an IT, or think of your bank. You don't want just everyone to have access and take your money out of your bank. You want to prevent that at all costs. And there's a lot of things that can be done today to do that. So that's what we implemented so that you couldn't take in impact or transfer the data without being properly authorized to do that within the vehicle ecosystem.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for that. So let's shift a little bit and look at today's reality. What we see now is, in your view, what's the most misunderstood, if there is anything that is misunderstood, challenge in managing automotive or mobility from a cyber standpoint, but also beyond today?
Well, I mentioned about designing cybersecurity into the product. In what struck me early on when we were doing this was a lot of people thought of it as like virus protection on your PC. We'll just apply it after the fact, and we should be okay. Um, and that's where you get in trouble. You have to effectively design this into your product to make sure that you're effectively covering that. That took us a long time. Um, and we used a lot of different methods of providing data to show why this was important. We didn't always win on all of those, but the other thing that we put in place is a risk acceptance process
Hmm.
that it protected us in the company, but it gave us an escalation method to go up to management. So you can imagine if you're sitting in a design review with a set of PD engineers and you don't gain concurrence to implement something for a reason, um, you would then have a method that was agreed upon amongst the organization for that escalation and sign off process. So we put in a NIST risk matrix that would allow us to classify the security classifications. And if they still wanted to launch with these exposures, um, we would take that to have the proper sign-offs. And that went up to the most senior people. Luckily, in my time, we've never had to take one up to the senior leadership. It typically, when you would demonstrate that it was a very high risk or high risk, and they listen to you, most of the engineers wouldn't want that to be taken up higher. So there is technical things you can do, and there's process things you can do that really help you drive things and be more effective. But timing is important. You can't sit there and debate things forever and ever. It's just going to slow down the overall implementation of what you're looking to produce and launch. So you have to have some methods that help give you some of those guide rails.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing is really the challenge, to bring something that eventually is fixtures or in the future or even abstract and make it real in the context of the risk appetite that you just mentioned and how to deal with it. So, yeah, I think it's really hard to do that transition from technically we understand the challenge, but what does it mean and how does it translate to the risks to the business, right?
Yeah, and I'll add on to that, Giuseppe. It also is how quickly can you provide a fix if you do have a vulnerability? So let's say that it was some physical components. You know that doing a massive recall to replace a module, one, is extremely expensive and very hard to do, versus if it could be corrected with a software update. That's where you get into some of your levels of discussion and your risk acceptance. Because if it can be fixed and it's not a safety critical and on and on and on, and they can quickly provide an OTA, then it changes the discussion a bit. But that's the type of dialogue you get into and how you set up your risk acceptance process and how you view some of those. And I think we did a good job of perfecting that and getting to those right away, because I know there was a number of cases where some of the sign-offs did say that we would have this within a period of days, that we would have the update and could be sent out to all of the vehicles.
Yeah, do you think that in that wider context, there are some very important yet undervalued drivers in the industry? Because ultimately, when you say risk appetite, but it impacts also, potential safety issues or even quality issues, where you don't know exactly what is the right time to do this, and how do you deal with things that pop up, but you really first need to understand before you can act upon, because otherwise the damage of acting is bigger than the relief of having a patch or whatever it is, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will also say one of the other uniquenesses about product cybersecurity in the automotive that does help us in it, and we leverage this in our discussions with senior leadership, is around um, the sharing aspect within the automotive industry, and this is global. And you may have heard of Auto ISAC. I know Upstream is part of Auto ISAC. It was in the beginning very interesting when you brought automotives together to discuss commonality amongst cybersecurity. That's just not in the nature of automotive to bring automotive people together and share what they're doing within their company. It never happened before. But from a cybersecurity standpoint, all of the OEMs and the tier suppliers are doing pretty much the same things. So the ability to share, and that helped provide validity to what we were looking to do with senior leadership within Ford. In that not only is Ford looking at this and addressing these things in certain ways, others within the automotive industry are doing the same thing. So that power of leveraging the industry as a whole, I think helped us progress things much quicker than we would if we were just trying to do this on our own. And that's not a new concept. The ISACs are there for the airline industry, they're for the finance industry. They work very well there. So I was very happy to see that transitioned and is leveraged within the auto industry.
Yeah, and it's the slogan of Auto Isaac, right? An attack to one is an attack to all.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that that concept is really important because, as you mentioned, historically, automotive companies don't like to share, but here there is one common goal, which is to make our streets more safe and secure, and therefore it's relevant and important to find ways to overcome, that type of reluctance to share information.
Yeah, one of the things that, though it doesn't mean that everyone's going to do things the same way when you have a discussion. And a good example of that, and I mentioned earlier, of the use of data to really help drive not only your decision making, but to detect vulnerabilities. One of the things that has amazed me across the auto industry is the use of data and getting the use of data, I guess, is more important. That in some OEMs, they sell data across um, profit centers within the organization. Um, Within product cybersecurity, it's all about using the data to detect, monitor, and prevent cyber attacks from happening. And it also helps drive requirements. If I don't have the data that I can show why we're doing certain things, that it handcuffs me to some degree. But having that data is very important, especially within the connected vehicle ecosystem. That would be the one thing that I would say across the auto industry, and probably not just the auto industry. You could expand quickly to other industries. If you don't have the company's data, if that's your product data, APIs, oh my God, APIs and AI, we could have a long dialogue on the criticality of that data to help detect vulnerabilities within your organization. I think that's critical. Anyway,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we could do several webinars around that, I'm sure, and I know how important, relevant, and dear this topic is to you. But looking specifically on the profession of cybersecurity expert. How has the role and your role, for example, changed over the last 3 to 5 years?
Oh my God. When you look, let's go back 5 years ago. What were automotives very heavy on? There was a race to autonomous vehicles. Everyone was going to have fully autonomous level 5 vehicles. And so we spent a lot of time in working with senior management around what is it going to take to protect it from a cybersecurity standpoint, both from a digital and a physical standpoint. I remember sitting in our cyber energy room with Jim Farley, and he was firing questions at us. If somebody got into a vehicle, could they get access to pulling cables or disrupting that would create a major safety issue? And we spent a lot of time perfecting that. Didn't really get implemented to the degree that anyone thought, and then quickly became the electrification phase, and everyone was going 100% electric, and we had to make sure the end to end for all of that was in place. And as we all know, uh, electric is a great thing, and it will happen someday, but it's been slowed by the lack of the infrastructure side of things. Um, and then you take a look at the use of the data in the connected side of things. So all of these things were happening at the same time, and we were somewhat scrambling to make sure that we were addressing all of these. The other one, and this is one that we spent a lot of time and will continue to spend a lot of time, because it's across all of the automotive industry, is the next gen vehicle architecture. And we hear a lot about the affordability of a vehicle. And the architecture gets in the way of a lot of that affordability because it's very complex. And it can and should be more simplified and easier to do. And there's a lot of reasons why that isn't the case. But I do believe the global drive to that architecture is going to have a big impact in pulling all of these things together, the autonomous capabilities, the electrification, and the connected vehicles. Look at all the commercial usages of connected vehicle type services. Ford Pro is a good example of that, of how many industries rely on that, and to have that secure, I think is very important. But it's all starting to come together. You're going to see more autonomous. You're going to see more electrification, hybrid, all of these things with new architectures that are going to make it more affordable. I think in this next 3 to 5 years, you're going to see all of that start to happen. And I think from a cybersecurity standpoint, I think we're in a much better position to move quick and to make sure that we're protecting that whole ecosystem.
Yeah, I think what I get out of it, it's not to have, it hasn't been boring, to put it in a very simple terms. And what do you think it will demand in the future? Let's say another 3 to 5 years.
Well, I also think the data is that you are looking at to make those decisions of where you need to focus your resources to protect that ecosystem and to drive decisions. Those that figure out that out and are quick to adjust and apply those things are going to be your industry leaders. But it's a global issue, and the attacks to this ecosystem are not going to stop. They're going to get more precise, and that's where I think you have to be smart in your usage. And going back to the beginning of here of designing cybersecurity into your design, but you still better be able to monitor it to cut things off quickly once you are out in production with what's happening, and what do you do to adjust to those? It's going to be, I think, equally as critical. So the software side of things is not going away. It's going to, I think, increase in how you use the OTA capabilities, and address those attacks is going to be critical. So I guess my word to a lot of the automotives, um, don't hold back on the use of data within your organization, especially the cybersecurity organization, because if you don't have the data to help detect the vulnerabilities are going to happen.
So this sounds really, overwhelming or even intimidating. What type of mindset or habit did you personally rely on when those things indeed became or are becoming uncertain?
Well, I relied on the data in making sure that I had a strong team that understood the technologies that were in play and that were happening. The perfect example of that is once again APIs and its usage within your vehicle ecosystem. For a long time, I referred to it as APIs gone wild. They were a great introduction, and people just implemented them without thinking of the consequences and the impacts of the security aspects of it. We're still trying to catch up to that today, and I look at that from end to end. Not only if you do the infinity diagram of the upfront designing of and creating APIs to the end bookend of monitoring that to detect. And people say, well, if you're monitoring and detecting that, it's probably too late. Yeah, but if you look at that full infinity, you're driving those requirements back into your software engineering requirements, and you're improving that. So, but you can't ignore either end of those types of activities. You better be looking to perfect those more. And I also understand that software engineering is very much different today. It's like playing Legos where you're putting components together as opposed to the full end-to-end design of those activities. So understanding where those changes are coming and that your team has that level of expertise and continues to develop those levels of expertise that help you be effective in what you're looking to prevent from happening.
Tim, when you look at your career and when you think about the impact that you've had, big or small, what are you most proud of?
It's a good question. I don't know if even though I'm at this stage in my career, I don't know if I've reflected back so much at what I'm most proud of. I guess I can say that I had a constant mindset of learning, um, and knowing that I don't know everything, and I got to keep that learning mindset, because if you stop that, as I mentioned, the technologies are coming at us very fast, and you better know how they impact, and you learn how to effectively use those and protect against the vulnerabilities with those. AI is the perfect example of that. It it's amazing to me how fast AI has progressed, um, but equally, how are we preparing to protect against the attacks on AI? Because decision making with AI is very fast, and depending how you're using that, you better make sure that you don't have misinformation, that it's not open to exposures. I think I mentioned early on that we could have an entire session on how APIs are used within the AI side of things, and making sure that that's protected. So I probably don't have a good answer for you there, Giuseppe, but I think it's keeping that constant open mind learning, and surrounding yourself with those people that have that same kind of view of technology.
Yeah, and then you mentioned AI, which is my next question. Maybe just in short, because we could certainly do another webinar about AI, as well as we just said for APIs. But how do you think, how does AI impact the role of a cyber security professional? And have AI tools changed your perspective on the impact that they have on the role?
I think the advancement in cybersecurity tools is definitely helping us be better prepared for using AI. Understanding the data and where you're getting the data and what data you're using. So if I'm looking to just write a report, I can use Chat GPT or one of the other things, and I'm okay with is it fully validated based on all of the AI? Because there's a lot of misinformation, and if you overflood something with misinformation, that's what result you're going to get. If I'm using it for the inner workings of the vehicle, the criticality of the vehicle, I'm sure not using the broad data set to drive that within my vehicle itself. I'm looking to use a very closed ecosystem for that data to put those controls because it's not going to lead to the misinformation unless somebody injects it, and you got to protect that from a cyber standpoint. It's understanding all of those aspects and where do you need to put the levers from a cybersecurity standpoint to protect that from happening, because we are going to use it. It's already happening. You just need to make sure that you're doing the work to properly secure it.
Yeah, looking ahead, what is it that excites you in, let's say, the next 5 years in general, not just in cyber, but about automotive, all those new technologies, innovations, et cetera, et cetera?
So we threw a bunch of stuff in there. As I mentioned earlier, if it's the levels of autonomy, if it's the architectures and to make the vehicles more affordable, um, we're introducing so many new functionalities, safety features, on and on and on and on. We haven't done a great job at integrating those well and making those cost effective. I think this next 5 years, you're going to see some very good advancements in all of these. The automation that is needed to drive a lot of this is important to help reduce the cost and protect. If I'm not protecting with automation, I'm going to be too slow to catch what's happening. But
Hmm.
everything is coming together, and I think you're going to see it happen. The reality of it's going to happen in these next 5 years. So it's a very exciting time within the automotives for those that really apply all of this and are effective at putting all of this together and making it happen. They're going to be the winners. There's probably going to be some that are going to fall out. Yeah, there's going to be regulations. There's going to still be a lot of those types of things. I think we handle those well. It's how are you effectively integrating the best of the technologies to make your OEM an industry leader. And you got to
Is
make
there,
money. You got to make money doing it too.
at the end of the day, yeah, that's why business exists. Now, is there anything that keeps you up at night when you think about the future?
You know, it's a different keeping me up at night. It's the excitement of what you need to attack now that is the moving target that's happening that you need to address. And the excitement of that and seeing what's coming with all of this stuff coming together, to me, it's a different type of keeping you up at night. It's more of an excitement than a worry of keeping you up at night. Cybersecurity, you're always going to worry about things, right? But it's a little bit different because I think today we have the tools, the methodologies, and the processes that, if applied, can really make a big difference in helping accelerate some of this stuff from happening.
So you're cautiously confident that the industry will get it right.
I'm absolutely confident that we're gonna get it right.
Yeah.
Those
Tim,
those that are committed to doing so, I think, are going to be the true winners in the industry.
got it. Yeah, we come to the last question of this episode, Tim, and the same question that I ask all my guests here is if you could whisper one tip that every young person entering this particular industry, what would you say to them? What is the secret? What is the tip that you would give them entering the scene?
But I think there's a couple things, Giuseppe. Technology is a great thing. Um, Embrace it and don't worry so much about not knowing everything, but keeping that learning mindset. Um, but enjoy the ride. The technology is going to change very fast. It can be intimidating. But if you embrace it and keep learning how to use it and surround yourself with people that have that similar mindset, that are willing to explore and take that step into the advancements of technology, it can be very exciting and a fun journey. Sometimes I think
Excellent.
I worried too much about recommending or doing something that wasn't the norm. I mean, think of the industry, in especially in IT, and success of CIOs. A lot of them stayed very conservative and went with those big players in the industry, and you typically could save your job. Those that really were pioneers that were willing to take not necessarily a calculated risk of doing things different, and they really help their companies advance.
Tim, thank you so much for taking the time to join this episode today. You shared an incredible journey with us. It's a privilege to have had you as part of Moving Minds, and we're really grateful for your openness and willingness to reflect on all the experiences that have shaped your perspective on mobility. So thank you again, and all the best.
Great. Thanks, Giuseppe.
If today's conversation offered a new perspective on what drives mobility, we'd love for you to follow the series, share it, and tell us your thoughts. You'll find more episodes with the people shaping what's next. One question, one insight, one decision at a time. Until next time, keep moving forward.